Tight end Noah Fant has hit free agency. Is he an option that could make sense for what is looking like a pretty light Miami Dolphins tight end room? We're exploring that here on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. You're on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today on the show is the day before I get on the plane and go to South Florida for training camp. Obviously, very excited, very exciting time. Dolphins players report tomorrow. I'm reporting to South Florida tomorrow. I get a chance to take in some of training camp and talk to the powers that be, right? Talk to the players, talk to the coaches. So it's an exciting window for everybody, including this platform here on Locked On Dolphins. So you're going to want to check that out for the rest of the week. But today, you go back to the 23 or 24 offseason blueprint. I was really excited about the name Noah Fant. And he's a free agent now. He was waived by Seattle in large part because of a salary cap maneuver. It's almost $9 million in cap space that Seattle will save. It's also, and I had somebody ask, hey, why did Noah Fant get cut before I get excited about seeing him on the waiver wire and potentially as a free agent? So there was significant salary cap savings. They also had Jackson Smith and Jigba, plus they brought in Cooper Kupp, all middle of the field target type guys. So I think you had a congestion on an overload of guys who probably all won in the same area. And then they had two young tight ends, one they drafted in the fourth round last year, and A.J. Barner, a good inline player, and then Elijah Arroyo from the University of Miami. Seattle drafted him in the second round. And I think he probably has a little bit more flex and movement around the formation ability than what Noah Fant does. And they obviously push Noah Fant out. So a couple of different compounding variables that lead to Noah Fant being an available player at this stage of the game on July 21st. The bummer is if you knew this was the case, I'd have probably skipped the Darren Waller stuff and just said, hey, let's just sign Noah Fant, right? But the world doesn't work like that. This is an unexpected pivot. Now, the Dolphins protected themselves with the Waller contract. It appears as though there's no guaranteed money on that contract. But the question is, should the Dolphins go after Noah Fant? Do I expect them to is a different story, right? Because we still have a need at corner. And Barry Jackson's reporting today that the Dolphins are remaining in constant communication with free agent cornerback Rasul Douglas. I expect that to get done. But the Dolphins, after signing Jonah Savaianaya, thank you to the football gods for waiting a few hours after I published the show at the end of last week before that one came through. Really appreciate it. But between doing that and the other transactions, the Dolphins are a little light on salary cap. And little light's doing a lot of heavy lifting here. They don't have a lot of space. They are amongst the league's bottom teams. So we have a couple different ways to go about this. And I wrote this for A to Z Sports this afternoon. It's 10 ways the Dolphins can create salary cap flexibility amidst the need to address a few lingering needs going into training camp. There's the obvious ones like Zach Sealer with a contract extension. Drew Rosenhaus said he would report with his teammates, so he's not going to hold out. But what he does is to be determined, right? Does he do everything? Does he do nothing? Does he do the Tua Tagovailoa thing where he does the individual stuff, but then he doesn't take part in the team drills because he wants a new contract? It's the kind of thing you would hope was going to be completely behind you. And maybe it will be. Maybe Zach will say, hey, I've made myself known. I really want a new contract. I'm going to keep playing ball. Maybe he does that. And if he does, then it's all that much more reason and hope for me to see them actually give Zach Sealer the contract extension. But then there's restructuring names like Aaron Brewer and Jordan Brooks, who figured to be here for multiple years, where the deferred interest or the deferred debt, I should say, is a little bit less high risk. But then you have some other options. And a name like Aaron Brewer saves you $4 million in cap space. Right now, my books have the Dolphins at about $750,000, $800,000 in cap space. They're right up against it, right? So before you can have the should you sign Noah Fant conversation, you should first ask, what kind of flexibility do we have? What can we create? And you need to remember, you need about $4.5 million, $5 million for a practice squad throughout the course of the year. And then you need your slush fund throughout the season if guys get hurt. With that in mind, it's good to know Jordan Brooks can get you over 5.5. It's good to know that Aaron Brewer can get you 4. So those two combined can get you over $9.5 million in cap space. The big interesting one is Minkah Fitzpatrick. You could do a contract extension, but you've brought guys in and paid them without ever laying it down for you. Do you want to do that again? Do you want to just do a basic restructure and split it between 2 years? And in theory, you could say, let's just use round numbers. It's not exactly this. The exact savings with a basic restructure would be $7.12 million in cap space for Minkah. But you could say, he's due 15.5, take half of it. It's 7.75 in 1 year, 7.75 in the other year. Again, I'm using a rounder number because it's easier to absorb. And that becomes like your slush fund money. And whatever you don't use, you do get to roll over to the following and corresponding year, which kind of brings you to the bigger picture conversation around what I think everybody's expectations are for how the Dolphins are going to manage their salary cap versus what they could do differently, depending on what frame of mind they are in, right? The last time they did a books reset in 2019, it was really bold and ambitious, and everybody was out, and they flushed the whole system out. But generally speaking, there's 2 different schools of thought. First, you can, and teams, there are a number of teams that do this. They restructure effectively all their players every year, and they create as much cap space going into a year once they know what their budget was and what they spend, and then they carry over into the following year. So the Dolphins could do these 8-9 restructures they have across the entirety of the board, and that's Minkah Fitzpatrick and Tua Tagovailoa, and they could extend Zach Sealer and do Aaron Brewer and do Jordan Brooks and do Alec Ingold and do Jason Sanders and cut Jake Bailey and cut Channing Tindall and whatever you like. Tyreek Hill's got a $10 million base salary you could do something with. That'd be really risky, especially like if you start the season bad and he's not happy and then he wants to get traded and then you paid him all this for what, right? Like a whole bunch of questions. But you could restructure all of it and say, hey, we played within our operating budget. Now we want to create as much rollover cap as possible for the future years, because if we restructure a guy, and let's just use Minkah Fitzpatrick in round numbers, call it 15. We push 7.5 over. We don't spend the 7.5. I can get my monthly credit statement for 2026, pay the 7.5 that's in my pocket that I never spent, and it's like it was never there in the first place. And I didn't get charged any interest in the process because there's no interest for deferring debt for the salary cap. I say all that to say, restructuring some of these guys at this stage of the game might not be a bad idea if you choose to subscribe to it through that school of thought. The other school of thought is it's bubbles, right? I'm going to get a credit card. I'm going to spend up to the limit, and then I'm going to pay off the debt. And then once I re-zero or I get a new credit card, then I'll spend it all again, and I'll blow up the bubble, and then I got to shrink the bubble back down. And there's expansions and collapses and expansions and collapses. And what the Dolphins choose to do in the next couple weeks, because make no mistake, they have to do something. You can't go into a season and field a practice squad with $700,000 in cap space. You can't do it. Can't work like that. You need more space. They have to do some things, regardless of what spending they are or are not going to do on free agents. Be interesting to watch. Noah Fant, his fit, a few more of the options that the Dolphins have, the needs pecking order, how high Noah Fant would be versus a corner or an offensive lineman or whatever else. We're going to look at that all next here on Locked On Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following all the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while all of your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes every regular season game feel like a must-watch event, whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning. FanDuel makes it feel like you are a part of the action. Right now, if you like NFL futures, the Dolphins, from a division standpoint, you can get them at plus 750 to win the AFC East if you think this is going to be the year for the breakthrough. No judgment if you do or don't. I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there if you like it. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can get $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. This ad is by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday on a day-to-day basis. Most of us can't just quit our jobs and take endless vacations, but we could start small, whether that's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement to your day, or talking to someone who can navigate your life's challenges. Therapy can help you set healthier boundaries at work so stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your day. It's a big thing for me. Like, I work from home. Right? Like, everything's always here. The office is always calling while I'm downstairs. And those boundaries are critical. BetterHelp can help. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of experience. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. The bank of Tua has yet to be touched. And there's two, this is going to be a show at some point. That same idea of cyclically how to approach the salary cap, I think it can be applied to that contract as well. But that is $19.3 million in cap space at your disposal. And if you were confident in Tua, you would be doing these restructures annually no matter what. Every team does it. And then maybe you take a year off to kind of prevent it from snowballing too much before you get into the new contract with what would be a third contract. Of course, Tua comes with a little bit more red tape than that because there's the durability stuff that's been a sore spot. And if it continues to be a sore spot, the team may want to have these exit avenues. At the end of the day, the Dolphins can save, if they move on from Tua Tagovailoa in the spring of 2027, they could save the final $83.4 million in cap charges against the contract. The question is, do you take that across 4 years and start that process now by doing the restructures and saving less in 27 and 28? How do you manage the other contracts that you have to transition away from if that's the case? Or do you not touch it for 2 years and then take the clean break and create a larger surplus of cap savings into future years? It's another interesting debate, but again, when it's debt-free deferment, there's no interest. It does create two different schools of thought where you could build the argument to do it, even if you understand the risk and even if you understand you may have to transition after 2 years. And you don't have to look any further than how the Denver Broncos navigated their situation to see the Russell Wilson thing was an albatross, and they got out of it. And they have a competitive roster, and they built around it, and they worked through all that dead cap. And even if you restructure Tua, your dead cap charges would not quite look like what Russell Wilson's dead cap charges looked like several years ago versus what Miami would be looking at with an exit avenue in a couple years. And that's in the worst case scenario. And if you come out with less than worst case scenarios, you're probably keeping them anyway. So they have lots of levers to pull. It's just which ones do you want to pull? Don't let anybody tell you, sit here and cry poor, this team's cap broke. Now, they're being strategic. They're being cash conscientious because that's the cost and effect of outspending the salary cap at a significant rate for several years, you don't want to end up waking up one day, your head leaves the pillow and you're the New Orleans Saints. You don't want to do that. Enough about the cap. The Dolphins could snap their fingers at any point, whether it's Minkah Fitzpatrick, Tua Tagovailoa, Aaron Brooks, or Aaron Brewer or Jordan Brooks. Those two guys combined, any of those three pathways, you could create 8 figures in salary cap space. You could create $10+ million in salary cap space, which would be enough to kind of, you do a free agent player signing, you have your operating cap for the season, you have your practice squad fund, yada, yada. You'd be okay. You'd be okay. So Noah Fant, the player, very dynamic athlete. Like, for all the same conversation pieces that you're going to have with Kyle Pitts, as if you wanted the team to trade for Kyle Pitts when it came out that the Falcons would entertain trading Kyle Pitts for the right trade offer, you got the same caliber of athlete, not as special of a player, not as long from a wingspan perspective, but you have the same caliber of player from an athlete perspective without having to give up a draft pick. The question is, what kind of finances does a guy who signed a significant, it was more than $10 million a year was the annual average of that contract, if I'm remembering correctly. What's he going to get on the open market? The Dolphins have the opportunity, and I view it very much like I view corner. If you're a tight end and you want to play, if you want to sign somewhere on a short-term deal and prove yourself and play, the Dolphins have the opportunity to play. And if you're Noah Fant and you come to Miami and you can't beat out Darren Waller, 1 year retired, and Julian Hill and Pharaoh Brown for playing time in the passing game, I don't know what to tell you, right? the ship's probably sailed. But this is a guy who's 27 years old. He's not going to turn 28 until November. He ran a 4.5 flat. He's 6'4", 250 pounds. He actually has better agility, significantly better agilities than Kyle Pitts. So Atlanta's probably pissed. I would imagine they're pissed. Like, if they were serious about moving off of Kyle Pitts, if I'm an NFL team and say, hey, Kyle Pitts is playing on the 5th-year option at $10.8 million, or I could sign Noah Fant potentially for a base of 4 or 5 up to 7 or 8 with incentives, why would I trade a top 100 asset for Kyle Pitts when I can go get a guy that's maybe a year and a half older in Noah Fant and the same kind of athlete, and to see what happens? There's a seam busting ability that I don't know that he's ever fully been able to maximize between his stops in Denver and Seattle. He's a below average blocker, which I think is the biggest surprise for Noah Fant. He has cut down on the penalties, though, which was a big thing. His first 3 seasons, he had 11, 4, and 9 penalties his first 3 years in Denver. Then he gets traded to Seattle. He had 1 penalty last year, so he cut down on that element of his game. Not a very prominent pass protector. You wouldn't expect that to be the case anyway, but he can put his hand in the dirt. Like, you think he's a functional, I think he's incrementally better than Darren Waller as an inline player, and I think Darren Waller in his prime was incrementally a better player with his hand in the dirt than what Johnny Smith was. So I think you're modestly better with the blocking element of Noah Fant. You're getting an equal caliber athlete. Johnny's probably a little bit more physical with the ball in his hands. Darren Waller's a little bit longer, pluckier at the catch point, physical at the catch point. Noah Fant doesn't quite have that element of his game fully ironed out. And as a result, he's never really been a player that's lived up to his potential as a guy that was the 20th overall pick in the 2019 NFL draft by the Broncos. But he does have some respectable figures from a receiving standpoint. 562, 673, 670, 497, 414, and 500 are the career passing yards in each season for Noah Fant. He's got 15 career touchdowns in 6 seasons, 301 receptions. He's averaging about 50 catches a game. If you told me you could get that, and he's a guy that for his career, I think he was better in Denver when he played more in line. He played 30% of his snaps in line last year, and I don't think it's a coincidence. It was probably the worst year of his career from an efficiency standpoint. At least in 23, when he had no touchdowns, he averaged 13 yards a catch and had a little bit more of a presence getting the ball down the field. But each of his first 3 years in Denver, he had more than 300 yards per catch. His rookie season, he had 8.3 yards per catch per reception. In Seattle, he was lucky to get over 5.5. So he's a guy who has a 3.5% career drop rate. He's a guy who has about a 50% contested catch rate. And he was pretty sturdy with it, with the exception of his first year in Seattle. He was 0 for 6 on contested catches. But he's forced 12 missed tackles the last 2 years. You work through understanding that the offense last year in Seattle was a dumpster fire, right? They fired the offensive coordinator 1 year in. They reset that whole system. So you understand that element of it exists. You understand he's a limited inline player, but he's probably a modestly below average inline blocker, but he's a plus athlete. He has sufficient level baseline. I think he can separate better than what Jonnu can as a route runner. He's got great hands. I think he's probably got more effective hands at the catch point than Jonnu does. Jonnu's a better player with the ball in his hands. If you could tell me you could get Noah Fant on the same kind of contract with the incentives, and you probably have to tie a little bit more in the way of guarantees to it. And I worry about the Dolphins having the position to create predictively the most competitive market and the most competitive contract offer. But if you get similar offers and you tie it to incentives and he's okay with that, then you have the marquee opportunity for somebody to come in and play. And Jonnu Smith proved that last year. You have the marquee opportunity to come in and play. And you got to beat out a guy that was retired last year in Darren Waller for passing game reps, and the guy's got no guaranteed money on his contract. Game on, right? It's like the Godzilla with the kaijus, and Godzilla comes out and the mankind realizes they can't beat it. This is when they rebooted Godzilla and the guy goes, let them fight, right? Like, give Jonnu Smith a contract with incentives and have Darren Waller in the room and let them fight. And whoever wins, have at it. You're going to be the Dolphins receiving game tight end for 2025. I would love to see it come to pass. I don't know that it's going to, predictively speaking. Now, where does tight end fit on the pecking order of needs for the Dolphins? We're going to get into that next here on Locked on Dolphins. Make sure that you guys stick with us. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to get Regeat Ready. Regeat Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost your blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Regeat's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast and on average, just 15 minutes. And effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked for you, Regeat might have the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch, and it's completely online. Regeat connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. So head over to Regeat.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Regeat website for full safety information. I would say, in the grand scheme of things, this is still probably third on my list of needs for the Dolphins. Pretty comfortable with the linebacker room, very comfortable with the safety room, like the composition, despite the unknown elements of the defensive tackle room. I think your guys being healthy in the edge room, I feel good there. I like a depth interior offensive lineman. We obviously need a corner. I think with your wide receiver situation, with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Nick Westbrook-Ikine, you obviously have Malik Washington, who had great chemistry with Tua. The running back room, you've got some youth blended in with Devon Achane and what he showcased that he was able to do. I think you have a big question to answer. If Devon Achane misses time, how do you take those responsibilities? But I don't think you're going to find another back capable of being a lot of those things. So your offense is probably just going to have to change. I would still put it corner, one corner, not two corners, one corner. I think this team needs one corner. Now, if you told me they signed two, I wouldn't be mad about it. But I think you need one corner. And then I would like to see another depth interior offensive lineman. I'm not sure that they would agree. But with the guarantee structure on the Darren Waller contract, they certainly have protected themselves from that being a catastrophic decision. Predictively speaking, don't expect it to happen. Figured I'd save that for the end of the show. But I would love to see it happen. And I do think it is fair to start to ask the question, now that the Dolphins have largely achieved their objectives, are they going to stay so stone cold steadfast? You're going to say, hey, we mitigated our risk. We achieved what our primary objectives were for this offseason. Let's move the small potatoes now and put ourselves in position to have a competitive year. I'll be really interested to find out. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins, and I'll talk to you all again soon.